Good evening, and welcome to a very special presentation of Master Leaf Theater, presented by Islanders Anxiety. I'm your host, Dan Saracini. With me, as always, is my co-host, Michael Leboff. And Michael, I know that you are very excited for tonight's presentation, not only for the content that we will be presenting tonight to our listeners, but for its author, Jonas Siegel, who is a favorite of yours in this particular genre.
Yeah. To say that this is one of my most anticipated podcasts of the past few seasons is both pathetic and true. I'm really excited to dive into this. I know we went into the Master Leaf Theater. I guess it's a part 1, part 2.
Mm.
The end of the Maple Leaf season is always a it's like sweeps week basically.
Right.
For us. So it's pretty excited, and these two wonderful articles are this Jonas has put together some real bangers in the past. He has not lost his fastball.
No, absolutely. If anything, he has regained speed and velocity on his fastball. It only gets stronger over time. In fact, I would say with every passing year that the Leafs waste with this core, it only gets faster and faster. And we will dive deep into Jonas's structure and his tone and his possible influences as we go on through the program. But we must first begin with the main feature of tonight. And this is an article that appeared at The Athletic a few days ago after the Maple Leafs have had their postseason press conference. It was featuring Brendan Shanahan, new team president Keith Pelly, who has a very interesting history himself, and head coach. And general manager Brad Treliving, going over sort of post-mortem what happened with the Leafs and what the plan is going forward. And needless to say, none of this satisfied Jonas or anybody else who follows or writes the Leafs, with one exception who we'll get to later on in the program tonight. So without further ado, let us read portions of this. We're not going to read the whole thing because we don't want the Athletics lawyers on top of us here. Do you want to start with the opening paragraphs here, or should I?
You take it. You take
Okay.
it. I'm actually really excited to listen to this.
Okay.
Article be read to me. It's I'm ready for it. I get such a kick out of it. So I'm just gonna be sitting on mute, cracking up.
Okay. So with that, I will begin, and then I'll hand it off to you in the next section. Okay. So this is how the article begins. Title: The Maple Leafs' plan to change is murky and comes at least a year too late, by Jonas Siegel. Dateline, Toronto. Maybe the most unusual part of Friday's long-awaited news conference from Maple Leafs brass was Keith Pelly's explanation on why exactly the team was keeping team president Brendan Shanahan at the controls of the organization for an 11th season. Wearing a Maple Leafs pin on his lapel, the new president of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment explained that Shanahan was, quote, a champion, a 3-time Stanley Cup winner, and, well, Pelly had only been around for 4 weeks with MLSE and liked what he saw. Quote, I don't have any other comments because I wasn't here in Toronto the last 8 years, Pelly said. I understand the results, but I can only evaluate what I have seen in the first 4 weeks. It was an odd endorsement, if it was an endorsement at all, and it didn't really explain why Shanahan will continue to oversee the Leafs after a decade and one playoff round won, nor wrestle with exactly what had gone wrong under his stewardship, or why that meaningful change at the top of the roster hadn't come sooner. In Pelly's explanation, he watched for 4 weeks, saw that, quote, chemistry and unity is being built at the highest levels, and decided it outweighed 10 years of the results. This is a fascinating and fiery opening to this. And it only gets worse from here for Keith Pelly. But yeah, this is Jonas coming out swinging, basically saying, you guys are a year late, and what the hell are you all doing up there? Is basically what his gist is here.
So yes, it is that. Jonas is a master of these kind of leads that make you think that he's in like Fallujah in 2004. with the way that he's writing.
Right.
Of course, he's the one who wrote the famous article about when Kyle Dubas was fired, and he
Mm,
granted anonymity to Maple Leafs employees. All of them are definitely real and not Jonas.
right.
And that the title was "Confusion and Hurt Ripples Through Maple Leafs in Wake of Kyle Dubas and his dismissal." I'm not going to rehash the whole thing,
It's a
but
classic. It's a
it is
classic.
a classic. The first 4 words are just anger, confusion, shock, disappointment, and then he goes on to quote someone that says that they're in mourning right
Yeah.
now, and that there's like a real sense of loss because Kyle Dubas decided to go rogue and get himself fired.
Mm,
And I bring that article up because this is really the sequel to that article.
yes, very much.
It is Jonas Siegel having a tantrum through flowery Canadian hockey speak. It's very LukeFoxJukeBoxian,
Right.
if you will. He's having a tantrum with his quill because Kyle Dubas is still not
Right.
the Maple Leafs general manager, and the man who fired him
Mm,
wasn't fired.
yeah.
That if Jonas really wanted to sum up his thoughts here, it could have been he should have just asked Keith Pelly, can you do me a favor and fire this guy because he fired my buddy Kyle Dubas,
Right.
who's definitely still returning my calls in Pittsburgh and hasn't left me on read
Right.
for the past 7 months. And if you look at this article through that lens, which I think is 100% true,
Mm,
valid, it makes so much more sense because this guy he's been called Dubas water carrier by us and
mm,
everybody for years, and he's trying so hard not to let that show, but it shows shows right through the language.
yeah.
And I just love that now these guys protected and carried water for Dubas for so long because the results didn't matter. It was about the process. This was a very big
Hmm.
the final score will take care of itself kind of crew. And every time the Leafs would get eliminated in the first round, they would say, you know what? Gotta run it back.
Right.
These guys are the results are what they are, but the process is what matters. And the process looks good because Kyle Dubas is the guy who's doing the processing.
Mm,
And now all of a sudden the results matter. The process doesn't matter. It's all
right.
about the results now.
Yeah.
And these guys have no self-awareness that we can read what you wrote, and we know what you wrote, and we know what you've been saying on podcasts for years and years.
Mm,
That this is the exact opposite. You just have completely done a 360, and it's all because you're still having a tantrum that
mm.
they fired your buddy.
Yeah, that actual thing is going to come up in our next passage and other passages following that, because there is one specific aspect of this Maple Leafs team that these guys all have come to agree should have been handled last year. To which I say, had they handled it last year, you guys would have absolutely pooped yourselves. But before we get to that point, I want to say one thing real quick. So I'm glad you brought up that Dubas article and its legendary opening about sorrow, anger, confusion, all that stuff. So if you're a frequent listener to our Master Leaf Theater bits, you know that we have decreed LukeFoxJukeBox the Jane Austen of this particular genre, because he is very flowery. First of all, he's prolific. First of all, if this whole thing would be basically just reading him, but we don't want to go too crazy off the rails with that. But everything comes up in blue and white flowers all the time, and everything is hunky dory, and is all about love and compassion and finding oneself. And he is by far the Jane Austen of this particular genre. We also decreed last time that the legendary John Tavares Unleashed tweet is the Beowulf of Master Leaf Theater, because it is the genesis of so much literature that has come after it, and is the basis for so much that has grown into this thing that we call Master Leaf Theater. I am here to tell you and everybody, and to basically decide that Jonas Siegel is by far the Charles Dickens of Master Leaf Theater. Everything with him is about pain, sorrow, and depression and delusion. Every house is bleak. It is never the best of times. It is always the worst of times when it comes to Jonas and the Leafs. And so he is by far number one on the Dickens list for Master Leaf Theater. And this article really, and the other article that you mentioned, really go to prove that. It's just everything is terrible.
And
Everything
I
is
guess
terrible
that
all the time.
Yeah, Dickens it's perfect. It
Mhm.
is. Yeah, this is a guy who, oh god, you could just see it. It's raining.
Yeah.
Jonas is just looking outside his window, and it is raining.
Mm.
Um, and I guess if if Jonas had a Miss Havisham benefactor in
Right.
his real life, as the most famous Charles Dickens character did, it would be, I guess, Kyle Dubas. But
Yeah.
uh, it's I don't understand how, like you said, it's Dickensian, however
Mm.
you would say it. None of these writer or editors, and maybe they have. I mean, we
Mm.
don't have
Well, we
the
know who
fact.
Jonas's editor is,
Yes,
but continue.
yes, yes. Yes, Jonas's editor is just weeping as he
Yeah.
reads these things. I couldn't get through the first paragraph because it was so, but, how nobody feeds back and it's just,
Mm.
I mean, if I this is what I do for work too. I
Mm.
write about sports, and if I were to hand in something that has ever walked down
Mm.
this path, I would A, it would get sent around, quickly and be like, "Get a load of
Right.
leave off," and the
Mm.
other and it would be like, "We're not running this because it's absolutely insane."
Yeah.
Um, but w what makes it even better is that it's just a complete change of pace
Mm.
from the language is not, of course, but now the party line is a complete change of pace, and all of these guys,
Yeah.
you and I had texted you and told you about how I, did an extra lap or 10 at Stop and Shop the other day because I had to get to the end of the Jonas Siegel, James Myrtle
Yes.
podcast called The Leaf Report,
Yeah.
where there's an amazing clip in it where James Myrtle said, I've been reading some of like the comments on these articles and the podcasts, and people are saying like we were the guys who were always saying, you
Run it
shouldn't
back.
blow it up.
Mm.
Yeah, run it back. And Jonas goes, really?
Yeah.
I did that?
Is that true? Like something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't I was cracking up, man. I really
Mm.
was.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing it be spelt out in, like you said, 1848 Victorian depression language.
Yes, there are other aspects of Dickens that also relate to Jonas. We'll get to those in a little bit, but let's read another passage here. Do you want to take this one from the
Yeah,
middle? And this
sure.
this deals specifically with Mitch Marner, who's going to come
Yep.
up a lot. Marner obviously making a lot of dough. Doesn't really play that well in the playoffs. Has been a bit of a lightning rod here, along with another guy we're going to talk about in a little bit. And this is where we start to get to the talking point of what should have been done before this season, and as it relates to Mitch Marner. So go ahead. This is from the
Yep.
middle of the article.
Yeah, exactly. So this was after the quote from Brendan Shanahan saying, we're going to look at everything and
Right.
consider everything this summer, which people in Maple Leaf Land thought was like this amazing.
Right.
Like Lou Lamoriello says that every time a microphone's in his face.
Right. Yeah.
If we can get our team to improve, we will
Yeah.
do it. Everything is always on the table.
And
Garth Snow.
Garth Snow said it
Yeah.
for 10 years.
Yes. Exactly. But for some reason, this is the first time these words have ever been uttered. So I'll pick it up here. Had the Leafs acted last summer, before Marner's no movement clause was activated, the Leafs would have had the freedom to move Marner anywhere they chose, without the extension concerns that come attached to any trade conversations. Parentheses. 2 summers ago, Tree Living executed a sign and trade that looked great initially. Matthew Tkachuk, who no longer wanted to play in Calgary, to Florida for Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar. It hasn't aged as well since the Flames almost immediately gave huge deals to Huberdeau and Weegar. If possible, Marner shuts down any attempts to move him. He could tell the Leafs he has no interest in leaving his hometown. Not yet, anyway. It could get ugly in that case if Shanahan and Tree Living insist on a move. The same could be true with Tavares, who has had a full no-movement clause for the entirety of his contract with the Leafs. It's not impossible that Shanahan's Leafs finally decide to change the core, and simply can't. Which begs the question, why now? Why did it take this long for the person at the top of the organization to decide that something had to give? Why not last spring when the Leafs were eliminated in 5 games of the second round? Or the year before when they were bounced in 7 in a close series with the Lightning? Or the year before that when the Canadiens humiliated them in erasing a 3-1 series lead? Why was this finally the year?
This is an astonishing section. It really is. Could you imagine if in 2020 the Leafs had lost to the Canadiens and Brendan Shanahan was like, well, that's the end of that. We're trading Mitch Marner.
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine that? Could you
No.
imagine?
Yeah, yes, I can. I would dream about it, and I was like,
Right.
"That's not the year." Oh,
Right.
Steve Simmons is calling for John Tavares to be moved already. Like,
Right.
that's great, but we know it's not gonna happen. Yeah, like you said, with that when they blew that Canadian series, you thought, "Oh, man," they had the Amazon documentary. Maybe this is
Right.
the year. How embarrassing that they set that entire, documentary, which was I always say that this team is covered by a bunch of people in the media who have covered it over since Tavares has signed. They've covered the Leafs as if they had already won
Mm,
the Stanley Cup, which they basically were guaranteed when Tavares came.
mm.
Um, and they use that language to describe them. Like that documentary was the manifestation of that in visual form, and then it just abruptly ends. And you think that, uh, yeah, maybe they do it then. And these guys that year, the year before with the Blue Jackets, the the next year against the Lightning,
Mm.
they always said, "We can't make any rash decisions because of, oh, we got goalied in game 7 or
Yeah.
the power play just went cold against the
Mm.
Panthers or whatever. We can't do it now. Like it's not the time. Run it back. Run it back." I'm sure if you just Twitter search Jonas Siegel, run it back, it'll just
Mm.
be him s- applauding Kyle Dubas for not being reactionary. So, which begs the question: why now, Jonas?
Right.
Why now are you deciding that the Leafs should decide to
Mm.
move on
Right.
after all these years of supporting the man in charge?
Mm.
And we brought this up yesterday. Why is the president getting all this flack? Like,
Yeah.
I hate Brendan Shanahan. I hated him as a player. I despised him as a Ranger. He was such
Mm.
an annoying. One of my favorite Islander Ranger games ever was when Victor Kozlov scored 4 goals, and Shanahan had a hat trick in that game, but it was in a losing effort, so nobody will remember it fondly for them. But I hated that man, and I
Yeah.
hated him obviously with his attachment to the Leafs and uh, the baggage that comes with that. He's starting to go up in my book here
Mm.
because of this kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, these guys, if these guys all hate him
Mm.
this much, they all want him gone. I want him to stay because it's making them so mad. I'm a big Shanahan guy all of a sudden,
Mm.
but it's just so weird that he's getting all this blame.
Mm.
He's the president of hockey operations. There's no other team in the NHL, and I can't speak for other sports, but I don't think in any other sport where everyone's like, "Yep, we got to get rid of like the director of player personnel at the Arizona Diamondbacks."
Well, I mean, I think you answered your own question before. He fired their friend. Like he
Yes.
fired the guy who they liked. And so that's that. It's funny that I did do a search on Jonas Siegel Run It Back, and I only found an article from last year, last June, in which he asked the question, are the Leafs really gonna run it back? And his answer was, yeah, it seems like they are. But he just sounded very skeptical about it. But again, like he wrote at the end of that one, if they do bring it all back, the question will be why? Is it because they looked around and couldn't come up with anything better? Is it because they didn't try? Is it because they truly believe that what they have and some tweaks around the edges will be enough to end that drought? We're about to find out. So, like, he asked a question, but he didn't really say, this is dumb. Like, he basically was like, well, I guess this is what we're doing now. And again, I get back to what I was saying before. You could make the argument now in 2024 that the Maple Leafs should have traded anybody in, back in 2020 or 2021 or whatever. But like, had you done that, then your entire relationship with that team changes. Like, had they traded Mitch Marner for, I don't know, Seth Jones, let's just say, I'm just going to throw his name out there. Like, what do you think would have happened to these guys? They would have freaked out. They would have went completely nuts if Mitch Marner, Mr. Toronto boy, is playing in Columbus, right? Or Nashville or
Yep.
whatever. Like that would not have, and they would have had the torches out for Shanahan then and Dubas. And like I think, but I think it gets, again, it's what we've been saying. Had Dubas made those trades, it would have been brilliant. But
Yes, exactly.
if Brad
Or they would
Treliving
have
makes
blamed
those,
Shanahan. Oh, this one's coming from Shanahan.
right, yeah, which is what they used to do to Lou Lamoriello. Any move they didn't like was a Lou move, and any move they liked was a Dubas move. And so
Yeah. It's
it's yeah, it's kind of crazy.
it's it,
Yeah,
if they had traded Marner, like you said, for Seth Jones or
right.
whoever last summer, and it was
Mm,
Brad Treliving like who did it.
yeah.
Because I think what the no movement kicked in July 1st, so he comes in
Mm,
and within a month and a half of getting there, he trades Marner for whatever.
mm,
Jonas Siegel would have had a hunger strike.
yeah.
He would have just been on a hunger strike. Been like, get Kyle Dubas back here,
Yeah.
and I'm not eating until Dubas is back because it's. But now it's it's a year too
Yeah.
late. It's you should have
Right.
traded him last year. Like this is all Tree Living's fault, and so much of that podcast that Siegel and James Myrtle did was just him criticizing Brad Tree Living for really nothing. Like just being upset that he's not Kyle Dubas because Myrtle is like, yeah, I know people in the organization think he's a rising star, and he's like, why?
Yeah.
Why is he a rising star? Why do they like him? And
Right. What's he done in his career, either in Calgary or here, that has given him?
Yeah, he brought up the Troy Brower signing.
Yeah.
Like, Troy Brower was signed He's like, he's this is the guy who signed like Troy Brower.
Right.
Like that was in 2014.
Yeah.
Like,
It's so funny. But so I want to stick on Shanahan real quick for one last thing, because this quote from Shanahan is really the crux of a lot of the consternation coming out of the Leafs guys like Jonas and James Myrtle. And they basically did a whole podcast on this, like you said, over at The Athletic. And really this quote is what really rankled everybody. And this is from Shanahan. Quote, "More information comes to you, different information comes to you. Certain things that may be felt in the past start to shift as you get that new information. So it's not that these assessments aren't made in the past, it's that you have to consistently be growing with your information and willing to adapt with your information." End quote. This is Jonas again. But that's the issue. These things weren't true years ago, and the Leafs didn't adapt with that information. The patterns and trends Shanahan talked about have been there for a while. The problems with scoring in the playoffs, the problems on the power play, the problems in big games, the challenges of constructing a roster when 4, and now 5, players eat up a significant chunk of salary cap. Either they didn't read or chose to ignore the warning signs in that Montreal series or the first Tampa Bay series or any of those others when something wasn't quite right, even if the players in question were incredible talents. So again, Shanahan is like, well, it's been 5 years and we're not getting it done, so now we have to change things. And these guys are like, well, why didn't you see that in year 3? Well, because it's year 5 and now we're making those changes. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Shanahan, he's perfectly capable of saying this himself, but now, like, oh, we weren't ready. Now we are. I don't know what else to say. It's kind of pretty obvious.
And once again, this was a plan that these guys all loved.
Right.
The core 4 bet on talent.
Yeah.
Like we're the only team doing this. We're who cares that it's 50% of our cap? Like we have good players, and you gotta. This is a progressive way. How many times did we hear Kyle Dubas being labeled as like a progressive thinker GM? So yeah, this is now it's all of a sudden these patterns and trends have been there for a while. Like you guys never put them under the microscope. Nick Kyprios did, of course. But
oh man, we're gonna talk about Kyprios towards the end. Trust me.
Yeah, and some other folks did, but these guys have just didn't. Yeah. And it's not new. This is not like a new thing that Brendan Shanahan just concocted last summer, where he's like, by the way, I'm signing John Tavares and Matthews and Nylander and Marner to these gigantic contracts. The guy who did it was fired. They already made that change. They said, all right, it was a mistake to do it this way. It was this guy's plan. We got to fire him and move on. And nobody said, oh, maybe, it was probably a good decision to do that because that was the guy who constructed the team like this. Because once again,
right,
nobody looks at Jim Nill and says, oh man, whoever's above Jim Nill in Dallas is really doing a good job constructing this team and this salary cap. Yeah. There's only one team. Why do we know who Keith Pelly is? Like, why do I have to hear about the reporting structure of MLSE?
Right. I'll go even deeper than that. Not only do I know who Keith Pelly is, but I also know that Keith Pelly was, for the last 9 years, the chairman of the European PGA, where he kind of oversaw the Ryder Cup and Team Canada in the Ryder Cup. Why do I know these things? Because we are made aware of them, because the structure of MLSE and the Toronto Maple Leafs is so very important.
It's so very important to know. How many times did we hear over the last week? Oh man, what was the most striking thing about that press conference? Brendan Shanahan wasn't the most powerful person up there on that stage.
That's right.
What? Imagine being a fan of you're just to go back to them, a Dallas Stars fan. You're excited. Yeah. Maybe you're a new Dallas Stars fan. You're in Dallas. The team's doing great. You're like, oh, I gotta listen to some hockey podcasts. Let me fire up these 32 thoughts or whatever. The
Mm,
first thing you're hearing about is the
mm,
the org chart of Maple Leaf
yeah.
sports and entertainment and power struggles within MLSE.
Got it.
Like, get to my team, please.
I forgot what his name is. Hold on one second. Let me look him up because there was a bit on 32 Thoughts where the oh yeah, Jeff McDonald Jeff Merrick opened up the thing and he was like, you know what it's all about today, Frege? It's all about Jeff Jackson, who is the new president of this. He's the CEO of hockey operations for the Edmonton Oilers. And I remember listening to that and being like, is it? Is it really all about him, the president, the CEO of hockey operations for the Edmonton Oilers? It's not about anybody else, the coach, Connor McDavid, any of those guys. So this was when the Oilers were kind of falling apart. But yeah, these guys, as our friend Arthur Staple likes to say, every complaint these guys have is besides the point. Like this, they're complaining about Shanahan's job. They're complaining about Keith Pelly coming in and only having 4 weeks to make these decisions. They're complaining about Tree Living trading Troy Barauer in 2014. None of this is relevant to what's happening now, which is that the Leafs can't get out of the first round, and their players are like, "Oh, we were so close." And as I said on Islanders Anxiety, so close to what? Getting out of the first round? That's not the job, guys. You're supposed to want to win a Stanley Cup. What is also funny is that these guys, as they're spending this money, are now reaping what they sowed, which is like, yeah, great, we're going to keep all these guys, and now, oh wait, we're just signing, you know, Ryan Reeves, really? Oh, okay. We're getting, who's Mark Giordano? How old is he now? Like, and so they're just kind of reaping what's happening and what this structure has brought them. I want to skip this next part. I want to get to the part of all the jobs, the to-do list for Treliving and Shanahan, because I think this is in a lot of ways the funniest part of this whole article, because it really does hammer home exactly the kind of situation that the Leafs are in right now and why Jonas is kind of pulling his hair out over this and why he sounds the way he sounds. So do you want to take this part?
Sure. Think of all that Tree Living and Shanahan must accomplish this offseason. Find the right coach to replace Sheldon Keefe. Land the right goaltender to tag team Joseph Woll. Execute franchise-changing trades, potentially involving Marner and or Tavares. Upgrade the top of the defense. Locate the right supporting cast members at forward, including more help at center, and more help still if Tavares moves. It's also probably time, even past time, to hand the captaincy to Matthews. If only for symbolic reasons. None of that will be easy.
Has any player, I guess I'm not in the room, but like just judging from what I see out here, has any player been less ready for the captaincy of this team than Austin Matthews? Like, it looks like he just doesn't care. Like, I don't understand. Like, why? Because he yelled at Mitch Marner on the bench? Like, I don't know. It seems really, really weird to me that they've decided he's the captain now. I don't know. But
Yep, nobody questions it.
right. Well, apparently Tavares said that he's like taken on a much bigger leadership role. So I guess if there's one recommendation, it's his.
Right.
But I just find this whole bit really funny. This is when I was like, wow, they are really, really up Shit's Creek here. Like this is gonna be,
Once again, why are they in this place?
yeah, right.
It's not because of Brendan. Sure, Brendan Shanahan deserves some of the blame because he's the president of hockey operations, but there was a GM,
right,
there for years and years and years who, you got to find the right coach to replace Sheldon Keefe. Like that was his coach. You got to land the right goaltender to tag team with Joseph Woll. You haven't solved the goaltending since forever. This is not a Brad Tree Living Brendan Shanahan issue.
right.
You got to execute franchise changing trades involving Marner or Tavares. Well, who gave him the contracts that are going to be impossible to trade?
Mm-hmm.
You got to upgrade the top of the defense. Once again, Brad Tree Living just got here. Like he tried that, I guess, and sure he didn't.
He's the guy who got Joel Edmondson, who everybody seemed to agree was pretty good,
right.
And Simone Benoit, who he signed to a contract, who people were like, yeah, he's okay for a third pair defenseman. He's pretty good. Okay, so yeah. He seems like he's trying to do that, but I guess maybe not.
And yeah, not according to Jonas. All of this whole mess happened because of Brendan Shanahan, and not because of the previous GM. Meanwhile, like you still hear about Lou Lamoriello deals there,
right? Yeah,
like, finally they're out from this contract that Lamoriello did. And yes, and I want to spend obviously days and days and days talking about the captaincy because
right,
that where sports, when you're a fan of specific teams, like, yes, you want to win the Stanley Cup. That is priority number one. To feel that for the first time, been dreaming about it my whole life.
Mm,
But the reality of the situation is that I'm a New York Islanders fan.
mhm.
So whether that happens or not, I don't know. It's not looking promising. But the kind of upshot and downshot to being an Islanders fan is there are secondary uh celebrations or things, accomplishments, things to win, or however you want to look at it, that matter not as much, but they're up there. And on July 1st in 2018, there's been one day that you, me, and every Islander fan has been waiting for, and we're as close to it as we've ever been. It seems like the tides have turned towards pushing us in that direction, and that day won't feel like a Stanley Cup.
Mm,
But if it comes without the Maple Leafs winning a Stanley Cup, or frankly going on a deep run, it'll be close. Like, that will be a really important day
mm,
when if he's gone
mm.
from the Leafs, right? Like, and
Oh,
and
for
and
sure.
has won nothing. Like, it's a seminal moment. It's petty,
Mm,
but being a sports fan is petty, and it's contrived and all that. Everything you want to say, yeah, sure, whatever.
mm.
But it's going to mean a lot to me as a fan if that day comes.
Yeah.
And this captaincy, the changing of the guard conversation about the captaincy, which everybody seems to think is a foregone conclusion that
Right.
Tavares is going to be stripped of the captaincy. Hilarious! I want to be there for the ceremony. Like, do you mind if I cut that thing off of his chest to give it and hand it? I'll be the master of ceremonies.
Hey, did we hire a
Um,
new equipment guy? I don't know. He just showed up. I never saw this guy, but he's messing with my jersey over here. What's going on? I don't know. I guess he's with the team now.
he said he knows the name of the practice center. He keeps saying that
Yes.
we got to report to the Ford Performance Center. Of course he's got to be a part of the team if he knows
Right.
that.
Right. He knows who
He
Keith Pelly is. That's the
He
whole
knows the
thing.
org chart. He knows
Yeah.
he reports to Brendan Pridham, actually.
Right.
He reports to Brendan Shanahan, and who but
That's so cool.
yeah, I mean, that this day, that the changing of the captaincy would be it almost a prequel to that day.
Yeah.
Like, I will soak up every bit of that. Um, the
Mm.
Leafs just tweeting out the picture of Matthews being like, our new skipper, with like the emoji of
Yeah.
the salute, and then the 8 or 9 articles that were definitely spontaneous and nobody was tipped off about, where Tavares is like giving quotes about
Yeah.
being happy to do it, and
Right.
being a good teammate and supporting and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And everyone's calling him a class act and
Yep.
all that junk. So I'm, so
Yeah.
get ready if you think that this having a special standalone episode of Master Leaf Theater for this stuff is nuts, and it is.
Yeah.
Um, when that happens, if that happens, you're gonna have to set aside
Yeah.
a half a day,
Oh
maybe.
my God. Yeah.
You know,
Oh, it's going to be like, I mean, I would be surprised if they broadcast that on MSG. That would be the greatest thing probably ever. We are going to focus on Tavares in our second story of the evening, but I want to wrap up with Jonas real quick because he is such a fascinating person. If you haven't listened to the Leafs Report podcast from The Athletic, you should, if only to hear how he and Myrtle try and rationalize these things. Myrtle, by the way, I listened to on the JD Bunkus podcast on Sportsnet, and it's actually usually a pretty good podcast. Myrtle was on today, and I got to tell you, as a podcast guest, he is absolutely terrible. He gave JD absolutely nothing. He was like one word answers. He was like barely checked out. He just kind of sighed a lot and was like, I don't know. And it's like, he can't still be mad about this because it's been well over a week. Now on his own podcast, obviously he has to do a lot more talking, but he still sounds very exasperated, very, very just depressed and just like kind of trying to figure out what's going on. Whereas Jonas is more kind of angry. Like he's really just like, why is this happening? What is going on? Why are people saying this? Like they just don't kind of get it. And as we've said before, like I don't want this platform of Master League Theater to be about bullying or attacking anybody. We are trying to have a little fun with this, parody this, but also kind of point out how ridiculous this is and how ridiculous this sounds in context and relative to every other market in sports, particularly in the NHL. So we are trying to, illuminate that kind of stuff. But one thing though, I got to say about guys in particular like Jonas is that, and our next author who's coming up soon, is that these guys are absolutely true believers. Like they are 100% dyed in the wool, blue and white, bleeding Leafs fans. And as we know from our scholarly work of the legendary Bonks Mullet on Twitter, the Leafs definitely lead hockey Twitter by a mile in, quote, I'm actually not a fan. I'm actually an unbiased reporter that only watches this team and high fives my friends when they score accounts. These guys are that. And, in a kind of a time when we look for objectivity and objective reporters, especially in sports, Jonas ain't got no time for that. He is not objective. This man is a Leafs fan writing about the Leafs. And the thing is, and I've come to realize this, I think, over the last little while and taking his stuff in, is that it's not enough for him that the Leafs be good. Like they are good, right? They're a good team that just can't win in the playoffs. These guys need to be champions, but they need to do it in a way that is absolutely 100% perfect to the letter. They cannot, there cannot be a single guy on the roster who is maybe kind of a nebulous role. There cannot be one person in the front office who doesn't have a job that we can define. There can't be one game out of place, one score, one shot that is in any way, shape, or form at all out of sorts. It has to be perfect or else it's not anything. And so this era of Leafs fandom, which is clearly not perfect, is really, really playing with Jonas's mind. And in a way I can respect that. Like he's a guy who's a big fan and he gets to write about his team, and that's fantastic. That being said, his writing is completely ridiculous most of the time, and his podcasting is ridiculous.
And he won't admit it.
And he won't admit it. And also, I can guarantee you and be very confident with great certainty that he has absolutely no such respect for us and our love of the New York Islanders and how much devotion we give to them. Because if you listen to the podcast, and I recommend you do, the level of disdain that these guys have for every other team in the NHL is palpable. It is unbelievable. Every other team is inferior. Every other team isn't good enough. Every other team isn't structured as well as we are, or has as much money, or have as much clout and have as much reach and have as much money. Everybody is underneath the Leafs, which also I think plays a role in how these guys cover it, because it's just so unbelievable. So while they are definitely not thinking about us in this way, we are definitely thinking about them this way. And I just find it funny that if somebody told them, like, there are these two Islanders idiots that did a whole podcast making fun of an article you wrote, you'd be like, why? Like, why would they worry about us? Well, dude, you made it. You made us worry about you. Like, it's just so funny. Anyway.
Yeah, you are that good at your craft that
Yeah.
we have to spend an hour every once in a while talking about it. Yeah, and you're right. Like this is it is in good fun and a satire and all that stuff, but it goes away if they would just be like, you know what, I'm a Leafs fan.
Right.
But when that kind of gets broached every once in a while on their podcasts or whatever, they'll be like, yeah, like I just got called like a disciple of Dubas or a huge Leafs homer. I'm not. This is my job. Like it's just my job. I don't care if the Leafs win or lose. James Myrtle and Jonas Siegel say, I don't care if the Leafs win or lose. It doesn't matter to me. It's 300 to 400 times a year.
Yeah. No.
And if you just had said, well, no, I'm a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, and this happens to be my job. All of a sudden, we're out of content. Right. Like we're out of it. It doesn't become funny anymore because you are not playing a part. You're not. Yeah. You're not wearing a facade or whatever. Like this is this does not become as funny. Right. And we've heard from a lot of people who love this kind of stuff because it drives everybody up a wall, and we've heard from people who are like, you guys please stop.
Yeah.
If Jonas Siegel tomorrow just comes out and says, I just want to say once for all, I'm a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. This goes away. This bit goes away because the whole part of it is that these guys are writing so circles around it. Just say it. Yeah. Just say that you want John Tavares Jonas Siegel on the radio has said that he wants the Maple Leafs to rename a street after John Tavares, who's won 2 playoff series in his career, and one of them was not for the Maple Leafs. Like, you can just say it. Just say
Yeah,
it.
right. And again, if you look around the rest of the league, now listen, there are homer writers everywhere, in Boston and Edmonton, I could think of in a couple of places, but like you go find any team in the NHL and find their like main beat writer. And you tell me that they write anything like these guys, even
No.
just at the Athletic, I, you can't find it. Like again, and listen, all right, fine. We're friends with Arthur Staple. We'll remove Art from the conversation. Go look at
Okay,
Aaron
there we go.
Portzline's
Yeah,
writing for the Blue Jackets.
perfect.
Like this guy has been covering this team since its inception, and even he doesn't write like this about this this team that he's covered. He's like the only voice of these guys. Like even the guy in Arizona, Craig Morgan, who's covered this kind of stuff. Great. Okay, maybe he got a little bit flowery towards the end when they were moving because it was a little bit weird, but like he's never it's always been very matter of fact, and he's covering the most insane team you could possibly find. And it's never been about like, oh, he's a Coyotes fan or he was there in 97 when they touched down for Winnipeg. Like, I mean, it's just so funny that this is
Yeah.
what these guys do and they cannot recognize it. It's so fun.
Yeah, they can't,
Right.
and they can't, despite thousands of Twitter commenters
Right.
throughout their career pointing it out to them. And
Yeah.
and you know what? I'll even say like Larry Brooks
Yeah.
of the Rangers, like he has his own style,
Mm.
and it's a different from anyone else, but it's not this.
Yeah. No.
It's not even close to this. This is by far. I've got friends at work who get such a kick out of Leafs coverage. When something happens, they always tell me like, "Oh, what should I? Can you like point me in the direction of what I need to do?" And I always just say like, "Start with this, and
Mm.
here's this video. Watch this, whatever," because they think it's insane too, and they don't
Mm.
watch hockey. Like one of them lives in Kansas City. He's just like this team is insane. How have I ever
Right.
heard? How have I never heard of this before? And I say, well, because
Yeah.
they're in the NHL and they're in Canada. Like
Yeah.
that's why. And people compare them all the time to like the way the Yankees are covered or the Cowboys.
Mm.
And I'll plead ignorance on how the Cowboys are covered. I got no idea, but
Mm.
it is so different because those sports get covered by there are national writers who are like authorities on them.
Yeah.
Whereas and tons of them, there's
Mm.
the NFL is just littered with like people who can cover the ins and outs of every team in the league. It's
Mm.
just a machine that way. And in hockey, it's not like you are represented. It's like you have like a bureau, and your bureau chief is your beat writers. And for some reason, one bureau has folks writing like you said, like Charles Dickens and and whatever.
Yeah.
It's almost it's like how newspaper men would cover the like westward expansion and like the railroad and like the Indian Wars, and they'd like write about this stuff, and they'd use this crazy language. You're like, is he writing about George Custer and his men getting absolutely annihilated? And he's like
Right.
talking about them being like heroic and all this stuff. Like
Yeah. Right.
it is so
Yeah.
unique, so unique.
Yeah.
And that's I think the kind of crux of this spinoff is trying to point that out and
Right.
show to people who are reading this and
Mm.
being like, why this sounds like crazy, and us telling you, yeah, you're not alone. It is crazy,
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
okay to laugh at it.
Right. Yeah. It is. And again, I'm just trying to think of other people too. Like I mean, even Montreal doesn't have people that write about the Habs like this. Think about that. Like,
Yeah.
they don't get, but I mean, Eric Stevens, who covers the Kings and Ducks at the Athletic, the Iceman, he's great. And even Andrew Gross and Colin Stevenson, who write for Newsday, who cover this stuff.
Right.
They don't write this way about the Islanders. And
Could you
Rangers. They
imagine
don't.
Andrew Gross writing a story
my
that
God.
starts off with anger, sorrow, disappointment? I'd call him. I'd call Newsday and ask if he's okay.
Is he all right? Yeah, seriously. It's just it's insane. But anyway, okay, we do have a second article to get to, and this one is by our friend LukeFoxJukeBox, again, the Jane Austen of Master Leaf Theater, and it is about John Tavares, who is now playing for Team Canada at the IIHF World Championships. They were up 6-1 today on Austria. Blew that lead, went to overtime, and Tavares won the game in overtime. So while it was funny for people like, yeah, that's what happens when you add John Tavares to a team. You blow a 5 goal lead in the third period. He did end up winning the game. But there's a couple of things here that are very funny, and we're going to talk about another guy, another critic of Tavares at the end. But this is basically Luke Fox trying to take John Tavares's non-quotes and turn them into a story about what the Leafs are going to do about John Tavares. And in fact, the title is "Where Do the Maple Leafs and Captain John Tavares Go from Here?" And one of the points here, I'll just read this out. I won't read the whole list, but this is at Sportsnet, by the way. One of the things that it makes Tavares such a blue chip, fantastic addition to the Leafs is stuff like this. The man is a rink rat who refuses to succumb to Father Time without a fight. If he wasn't repping his country in games of consequence, he'd probably be punching the clock at Ford Performance Center, working on his acceleration and snapshot anyway. Summer is long for first-round victims. Tavares is seizing an opportunity to get energized by young talent and try to capture gold in a beautiful city. Is this the perfect Luke Fox jukebox paragraph? I think it might be.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think not just me. Like if you were to read that article to anybody who's listened to our Master Leaf Theater, say within 6 words, be like, "Oh, it's Luke Fox."
Right.
It's classic Luke Fox jukebox. As you said, he is a absolute legend in this genre of taking something so mundane,
right,
and turning it into prose. And it essentially, if he was covering a if his job was being like the beat reporter for let's just say an emergency room, and he was and the captain of the emergency room was he was doing a story on whether or not they maybe should be taken on an administration role or something. The first thing he would talk about was them punching in, like and turn it into a 6-paragraph lead about to watch this nurse punch in to the time clock is like watching a lion go through its just something crazy like that, because he's able to take these incredibly routine things and just make you read them and think you're reading about like General MacArthur or something, or some Iwo Jima. It's not heroic to show up to practice at the Ford Performance Center and work on your acceleration or snapshot. But it sounds heroic when you write it, Luke, and I give you a ton of credit for that. Like it's hard. It has got to be monotonous, because I'm sure Luke Fox, as the lead writer for Sportsnet on the Leafs, is he's got probably a quota that he's got to hit where he's got to write almost every day, and not something exciting doesn't happen every day. But somehow this man has found John Tavares' rink rat habits exciting. And it's beautiful.
I would love to hear a list of NHL players that aren't rink rats, because I would assume that most of them are. That's how they get there, right? Like, who doesn't, is Bo Horvat at Northwell Health Ice Center right now? Maybe he is. I don't know. It's possible. Sure. Why wouldn't he be, right? But Matt Barzal might be. Like, it's
he's not going to succumb to Father Time. Like, what?
But you're not going to get like articles from Andrew Gross being like 7 a.m. Matt Barzal strolls into Northwell Health Ice Center, skates over his shoulder, ready to tackle the day. Like, what? What are you talking about?
Donning a leather jacket and boots.
Yeah,
because his style is off the charts.
Right.
in quintessential Johnny Boychuk fashion. It is. I think that's actually the best way to look at it, right? Is you read these or listen to us read these, and then you think immediately, what is the Andrew Gross or Ethan Sears or Arthur Staple version of this story for the Islanders? And it would take a long time to get there.
Yeah.
I would say maybe once a year we get a story with language 3% as flowery as this, and it's because there's some really sentimental thing happening. Kyle McLean is playing for, and his dad is the coach.
Yeah, or like
he's not punching in.
This year would have been Cal Clutterbuck's 1,000th game.
Yes,
and even then, like the quotes are like, "Yeah, he's a great guy. I love." It's Casey Cizikas being like, "Well, he's my best friend, and I've been playing with him next to him for 10 years." Okay, well that's great. Like that's it. You wouldn't.
Yeah, you don't hear Casey Cizikas like described as Clutterbuck's tattooed lieutenant, with glistening eyes,
right,
and a smile that could stop a room. Like, It's
Right. Yeah, you don't get a whole thing about like,
it's
his
remarkable.
kids and all. It's just, but that's well, the only time we'll get that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Everybody gets like one and then that's it. But do you want to take this next part? We're almost done here. We only got two really more parts to read. Do you want to take this about playing in
sure.
Toronto here?
Yep. You might think this is an article from maybe 2016 or something with this quote. Quote, I love playing here. It's a remarkable place to play, Tavares said. And when I committed here 6 years ago, obviously I saw a tremendous amount of talent and an amazing hockey market, an organization that's fully committed to winning and doing whatever it can. And I still feel that way. Whether it's facing defensive teams, physical teams, whatever's required, I think we've certainly shown a lot of growth in those areas. Obviously, we've still got to overcome some of the hurdles to get the job done. And that's on us and on myself, but I think we're right there. Tavares hasn't thought about the extension, but, quote, loves, end quote, playing in Toronto. Ah, there's the rub.
There is
Okay.
the rub indeed. Little Shakespeare thrown in there. But yeah, so here's the thing. Toronto may have fallen out of love with John Tavares. And there's one guy who we know of who lives in Toronto and has a radio show in Toronto that absolutely hates John Tavares. And his name is Nick Kyprios. Now, I'm as shocked as anybody else with this old Ranger guy and us being sort of aligned on this. But I highly recommend listening to Real Kipper and Born. The first hour is all Leafs, and these guys come at it from a different perspective of like a Luke Fox or a Jonas Siegel. They will rip into their articles just as much as we will, although it's a little bit gentle with Luke Fox because they work for the same company. But they did bring this up, and they did talk about Tavares today. And I'm not kidding when I tell you that Kyprios is ready to like drive Tavares to the airport and put him and his damn family on a plane to literally anywhere. Like he's over this. He thinks it's time to move on, take the C off of him, trade him somewhere. They were talking about like how his salary is going to get paid, but then his cap hit is going to still be high, but his actual payout is going to, because he's getting paid mostly in signing bonuses, his actual payout is going to be pretty low. So somebody who needs to make the cap floor might find him to be an attractive asset, and he can still play. I mean, it's not like he did put up 12 points last year. He put up 60 points. So like, the whole thing is they're like, well, maybe Chicago or Anaheim or San Jose could use a John Tavares for the leadership. The way Kyprios speaks particularly when he talks about Tavares in this sort of like hissing, kind of like almost disgusted way. He's just like, got to get this guy out of here, JB. Like it's just the way he says it is so funny, and he's about done. He's also ready to trade Marner too, but the way they talked about Tavares today, had me convinced that they're going to trade him. I know he's got the no movement clause and all that blah, blah, blah. I get it. But like, if they trade Tavares and they can find a taker because he is still good, and there are teams that are going to need, cap hits like the Chicago Blackhawks, for example, that means that they don't have to trade Marner. They can keep Marner and hopefully, they'll have opened up all this cap space, and then hopefully they can, he can unlock things and feel settled and get his smile back, find his smile again, like Shawn Michaels. But I'm convinced now that they're going to trade Tavares, and I really, really hope that it comes to pass because I really want to see it. I hope it's Chicago. I really do, or San Jose, one of the other two. But Chicago, again, getting back. I'm looking at the roster today. I'm like, why wouldn't they just trade Tavares for Seth Jones? Like, why wouldn't you just do that? One guy's making like $9 million, another guy's making $11 million with a $9 million cap hit. I don't think it makes either team any good, but like to me, that's the easiest trade to make, right? Like, why not just do that? And then you rid both problems. But I guess they don't want the cap hit back.
Oh man,
I don't know.
Yeah, but you said it, and there's there was a great part of the show where Justin Bourne was like, he's been a successful Leaf, and Kipper goes, he's been okay.
Yeah. They haven't done anything, JP. Yeah. They haven't accomplished anything.
He's led them to what? And I was picking up like toys in Isla's room, like cleaning up before going to pick her up, and I stood up. I was like, "Whoa, that felt good. Felt really good to hear."
And Justin, by the way, was like, the other thing too is like, the conversation is obviously like they have to waive their no trade clauses, no movement clauses, either Tavares or Marner, and like not waiving the clause is you're running the risk of people getting mad at you, because this is what happened to Matt Sundin. Leafs fans turned on him because he wouldn't waive his no movement clause, and they were going to trade him when they weren't going to make the playoffs, and they wanted to get a big package for him, and he wouldn't do it. And then he ended up signing with Vancouver the next year because he was able to do that. So you run that risk. And Justin's point was that he's already hated in one market. Like, he doesn't want to do that again, and he can't do that in his hometown. And that put a big smile on my face. And it's just sort of like, yeah, now you see. Now you know. I mean, Justin already knows. He gets it, but I wonder if that changed any minds too. Like, oh yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, yeah. It's so good to hear this stuff because watching him become persona non grata has been really a treat, and getting LukeFoxJukeBox uh to turn this article in, and hearing Kiprios say it, and there's very few people who are like willing to die on the Tavares hill now,
Mm,
because it's by definition this is something that drove us nuts in
yeah,
previous iterations of Master Leaf Theater, was that nobody was willing to call this a failure. Like, everyone was, as I said, like, they're covering this team as if they're just gonna win or they already have won, and finally people are
right.
like, yeah, it was a failure. Like, this was a mistake. It was probably the thing that killed the Leafs more than anything, is this Tavares deal.
Mm,
And just hearing that and knowing what's to come if he does leave is it's it's been a jolt to my life, honestly. It's been really nice
right.
to think about, because this yeah, it's like I said, it's as close as we've ever been. That we've had previous years where we've done some, celebrations when the Leafs get eliminated. We usually do a good bit on that in that immediate episode, and we talk about, okay, we're getting closer, but there's still a long way to go. We're getting closer, but there's still a long way to go. And now it's like, oh, we can see that horizon, man. That we're like approaching that horizon, and not only are we approaching it, there's a lot of people on the ship now that are late
Yeah.
Maple Leafs fans who are like, yeah, we're with you, man. Let's get this guy out of here. And that is a surprise because I didn't think it was ever going to come to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and
Yeah. I know.
this is the quotes from Tavares too have just been so good. Like,
Yeah.
talking, he's the especially on Kiprios' show, like, they talk about how he's just like a robot and he shows no emotion,
Mm,
and that's finally started to catch on there too. Like, this guy
mm,
is a hockey robot. He just says whatever he's been trained to say his entire career, and that is part of
mm,
what the problem was with us, is like, yeah, he's
mm,
saying the right thing, but it's so hollow. We could see that those were all
yeah.
such hollow words because he was just coached up to say, oh, I love the fans here, they're so passionate, and we just
Yeah.
got to get the job done, and
Right.
we owe it to
Right.
them, like, and I want to
What
be
what
here for it.
But what's funny is that when he was with the Islanders, and like, it was a 3-ring on fire circus every single day, those quotes made you feel a lot better. Like, they that was what we wanted to hear, because we hadn't heard anything like that from anybody in a long, long time, right? Like, he was almost the adult in the room even when he was 19 years old. Like, that's what's kind of funny about it. Now, when people want to hear more because this team keeps falling on its face and not, meeting it's their own standards, now it's become a problem. So, but it is funny how he was always like this, and nobody seemed to
Right.
care all that much back on July 1st, 2018, that he never gave a good quote in his entire career. But here we are. So one more thing, and it gets back to exactly what you were saying. This is our last quote of the evening. If you have been here for this entire program, we really appreciate it. Thank you for being such a hater and indulging us in this. Anyway, this is our last quotation here, and it comes from the end of the Luke Fox jukebox portion, where he writes, "The question is twofold. Would Tavares, who holds the hammer here, be willing to waive his power and accept a trade, realizing the Leafs won't be in any rush to re-sign him? Sidebar: would Shanahan dare make things prickly by stripping Tavares' C and handing it to Austin Matthews? Because Tavares already freely acknowledges that Matthews is the club's driver? Does such symbolism even matter? And just as interesting but less discussed, can the Leafs actually improve by dealing Tavares? While Tavares isn't the emotional leader many fans are craving, and his effectiveness is in decline, he's still an elite faceoff man, 59.3%, and incredibly durable, 80 games played. He's a respected, low-maintenance teammate whose work ethic flies off the charts, and his production, 29 goals, 65 points, will be difficult to replace." Here's the thing. Those numbers, you know what they make John Tavares? An $11 million Yannick Perreault. which, as you all know, Perot played forever because he was good at faceoffs. But the other funny thing is, like, yeah, he's an $11 million Yannick Perot, but the big difference between John Tavares and Yannick Perot is that Yannick Perot actually went to a conference final with the Leafs. John Tavares so far has not. So I was reading this and I'm like, wait, where have I seen those stats before? And I was like, oh my God, those are Yannick Perot stats. That's incredible.
Oh my God. Yeah, and this came up with Kyprios too, as it's gotten so bad that they are like they're gaming out like the conversation, and they do this all the time on the Kipper show. It's in lunatic behavior where they pretend to like be they role play as Brendan Shanahan or Kyle Dubas or Brad Treliving having the conversation with one of their players, and Kyprios plays the role of I don't know, I guess Keith Pelly in this or Shanahan in this instance, and talking to Tavares, and he basically pretends to be or role plays them as a bully, like, oh yeah, well we'll take away the captaincy, and Bourne is like, they're not gonna like drive this guy out of town. He's like, they'll make it ugly. And I was like, make it ugly, please. I mean, this stuff was so good. It was so much fun to listen to him pretend to be Brendan Shanahan bullying John Tavares out of Toronto. But he's not alone. Like, this is a legitimate thing that gets discussed every day on Twitter now, is like, well, if they take away the captaincy, like, will that be enough to get him to think, oh, I should leave? And Kyprios brought up something, and I was so happy he did it. I was so happy he did it. And Bourne agreed with him. He's like, JB, he already left one place and is hated there. If he hangs on, there's a chance he does it again. And this is his hometown. I'm like, oh my God. Oh, this is so good.
That's what I was saying before. Yeah, it's so funny. I hadn't thought about that, but that made me very happy.
It was.
I was like, oh my
it
God.
was the hearing that stuff. Oh, like I there's very few podcasts like you could go back and listen to more than once. I earmarked that like 6-minute segment because boy, oh boy, just hearing those, it felt like finally, like, you guys are seeing what we've been saying for years now. And we're so close. We really are. And so
we're so close, and yet we are still much like the Leafs fan. Here we are laughing at Leafs fans, Leafs writers, really more the writers than anything else. And yet we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
We all want to see this team do something that we want them to do. For them, it's, get better, get some additions. For us, it's we want them to trade or just do something with John Tavares that gets him off of the team. Like, that's what we just want. And to continue to fail.
It's true. That's funny. I didn't think about it that way. That, like, they want this. We both want the same thing here for very different emotional reasons. Like, it's the celebrations will be hilarious to watch, like Leafs fans and Islander fans celebrating at Maple Leaf Square.
Right. That would be too funny. Well, thank you all again for listening to this first ever standalone episode of Master Leaf Theater. Mike, do you have any final thoughts on what we've read here today, and what these guys how they've contributed to the genre of flowery Maple Leafs writing that goes beyond anything else in the NHL or in sports, frankly?
No, I'm just honestly grateful that we have an opportunity to talk about this stuff, because it's one thing to be texting them and being like, this is insane, and then but finally we've realized that there are other people out there who enjoy it as much as we do, and are perplexed by it, in awestruck by it, pissed off by it. Like, the range of emotions that these writers can bring out of you is second to none. We wouldn't, we'd be very different people without these folks. So of course we owe them a great bit of gratitude too. I'm assuming, barring something crazy, this will be the last one for quite a while. So I always want to say thank you for listening to these, because they are objectively maniacal and crazy and should not be out there at all. But they will continue to do them as long as people enjoy them, and hopefully we're heading towards an episode that will live in infamy. But we're not there yet.
Yes, this might be our only one of these for a while, but Master League Theater is only possible thanks to listeners like you. So if you want to hear more of this content, please let us know and tell us that you want to hear more Master Leaf Theater standalone episodes. In the meantime, we'd like to thank our premium sponsors and generous benefactors, including VintageIceHockey.com, The Pinot Project, Foco.com, the Fans First Sports Network, and of course, Lighthouse Hockey, for over 15 years, bringing you the best Islanders news and discussion. That just concludes our episode of Master Leaf Theater for this evening. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back again next week with a episode of Weird Islanders, the podcast, our 50th episode. Get to the Patreon and vote for who the weirdest Islander of the year is. Patreon.com/IslandersAnxiety. Thank you very much, and we will talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.